Good morning. My name is Mike Hayes and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Student Life. My first order of business is to add our welcome to the University of Chicago, and secondly, to welcome you to your first Campus Life meeting. CLMs will be helpful for you in understanding more about the university's fundamental values. You will participate in 2 such meetings today and another during Welcome Week. We have a robust program this morning discussing one of UChicago's foundational values, free expression. Joining me in the session today are 5 members of our community who will share their experiences and perspectives on this important value. With me are Michele Rasmussen, Dean of Students in the University.
Hi, everyone.
Eleanor Citron, a member of the class of 2022.
Hi.
Ravi Randhava, Assistant Provost and Executive Director for the Center of Identity and Inclusion.
Hello.
Regine De Rousseau Unison, Deputy Dean of Students in the college and an alumna of the college, class of 2003.
Good morning, everyone.
And Leila Brammer, Director of the Parcia Center, Program for Public Discourse.
Hi, everyone.
We're going to hear from these outstanding panelists throughout the program. We have a lot of ground to cover this morning, so we are going to jump right in. I'll be posing several questions to our panelists about some of the foundational and contextual issues around freedom of expression, both nationally and here at the University of Chicago. The baseline from which we start our discussion is the 2014 report of the Committee on Freedom of Expression, or known as the Stone Report, from which the Chicago principles were framed. The link to this document was provided to you in your pre-orientation materials. So let's get started. Let's contextualize free expression in both the academic setting and then what it means in a larger context. First, for both Michele and Leila, why is free expression so important in an academic setting? And Michele, will ask you to go first.
Thanks, Mike. And first of all, I want to make sure I say a big welcome to all of you. We're delighted to welcome you to the University of Chicago. And I look forward, along with all of my colleagues, to seeing and meeting with you in the weeks and months ahead. So when we think about universities, we think about them as places where people with all kinds of different experiences, histories, backgrounds, and points of view come together in one place. And for places that pride themselves on fostering an environment where the very best ideas get brought to the forefront, are debated, are argued over, are discussed, that really is only going to work if you have a diverse set of viewpoints that can be shared at any given time. If everyone comes to a university environment and feel that they can't freely share their views, scholarly or otherwise, then you're not going to really have ideas compete with one another to see which ones are the best. And ultimately, you're not going to really advance knowledge, which is what universities are all about, especially the University of Chicago, which has a long and exemplary history of being at the vanguard of all kinds of academic disciplines. And one of the things that's really special about the University of Chicago is that everyone's perspective is weighted equally. So whether you're a student, a faculty member, a postdoc, a researcher, a clinician, your viewpoints, your perspective, your ideas have equal weight in terms of their ability to be argued, dissected, debated, and that is what makes this place so special. So in order for that to work, the responsibility of the university and the university's administration is to make sure that the environment at all times is conducive to that free and robust exchange of ideas, so that people don't feel embarrassed or ashamed or fearful of expressing a point of view that might differ from somebody else's. And we need to have that environment at all times, and that is our special responsibility. And the Chicago principles attempt to provide a rationale and an explanation for why that is so important.
Thank you. Leila, your thoughts?
Again, welcome to all of you. And Michele did such a nice job of contextualizing why we have this value. And I just want to extend it one step further. We often talk about this free expression notion as an individual right, Michele captured some of that real purpose of an educational institution and why it's a communal value. And I want to extend and talk about then what that requires of each of us. It requires that each of us at an educational institution are willing to and able to test our ideas. We need to be able to come up with what we think are our best thinking, but then we need to be able to test and hone it against those who offer a multitude of different perspectives. And we need to build the capacity to be able to seek out those differences. That's how our best scientists and academics do their work. And that's what we're going to ask of you as you join this community. Your ability to hold an idea, but your ability to go and test that idea against those who are out there in the world. And that is the endeavor that we've invited you into, and that includes testing us as well. That's why we welcome a new class and new graduate students every year, because you're part of us advancing knowledge in the world.
Great, thank you. Michele, free expression has been at the front and center of higher education for several years. Can you summarize why this is such a hot topic at some institutions right now of higher ed?
I think fundamentally, the bargain you enter into when you embrace the principles of free expression is that you have to be able to respect, if not agree with, or even not condone viewpoints from all types of perspectives, including those that might be very foreign to your way of thinking or that you might even find offensive. And while we have certain guardrails to just to make sure that certain types of speech and expression are not okay, anything that is defamatory, for example, anything that is a genuine threat or form of harassment against an individual or group of individuals, that is not okay. But there's a lot of speech that a lot of people might find really unsavory, or really contradictory to what their particular point of view is. It could be a personal opinion, it could be a scientific opinion, it could be an academic opinion. And part of the difficulty is having an environment where all of those points of view are permitted, but helping people understand that just because those views are expressed and permitted does not mean that everyone has to agree with them, but we have to make room for them to be expressed. And I think what we're seeing in recent years with a tremendous amount of empathy and sympathy for the experience of people who have historically been marginalized, who have historically been discriminated against, oftentimes it feels like there's a tension between the very, very real and very, very important work of righting those wrongs. It seems to run afoul of our principles of free expression. And that is one of the most difficult challenges, I think, on modern university campuses, one that we're very aware of and one that we try to work through with students, faculty, and staff every day.
Right. Thank you. Leila, the topic of hate speech typically arises in discussions of free expression. Can you frame that quickly and potentially discuss some of the issues and dilemmas that arise in those discussions?
I think Michele got us started again really nicely with that. I do a lot of presentations on free expression, and I can tell you one of the first questions is about this notion of hate speech. I tend to focus on the practice rather than the legality, but I think it's important to note here that among countries out there, there are some that have of speech laws in which hate speech is a legal category. That is not true here in the United States. In the United States, we have among the most liberal and least restrictive notions about free expression and free speech. And what that means is we often look when a hate speech or what we find hateful happens, we look to institutions to step in, and you know that isn't going to happen most likely. And so what we need to do is think about how we counter that, and we counter it with the very thing that we have, which is free expression, the counter speech. So if you find something hateful, please raise your voice, point out those instances. And I would go one step further, because there is the counter speech, but there's also the thing that I think helps us most, and that is using our voice to create a more inclusive and productive public discourse. If we do that, if we use our voice to welcome in and engage with a multiplicity of perspectives, we will create a public discourse that is robust and is the best counter to speech that we may find hateful or silencing or marginalizing.
Great, thank you. Great way to start us and frame this topic for us. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about what it really means here at the University of Chicago. And so I'm going to ask all five of our panelists a question inside this topic. Ravi, I'm going to start with you. And what does this look like in practice at the university?
Sure. So from where I sit, the university's commitment to free expression means that we support you as students in expressing and really exploring your ideas through deep conversation, through written work, through programming, through various art forms, through protest and demonstration, and occasionally counter-protest, and many other forms of expression. It means that we embrace challenging conversations, and in fact that we strive to normalize those challenging conversations. We believe that wrestling with a perspective or an idea that you haven't considered before presents opportunities for growth, even if you end up reaffirming your original position and further developing your arguments in the process. I would say that it also means this is an exciting place to be and that there's a lot to learn, both in terms of advancing knowledge, but also in terms of how we do it. And there are a number of skills that can help us engage on a deeper level and pave the way for more meaningful interactions. So that's what it looks like for me.
Yeah, thank you. Leela, based on your last answers and then in the academic setting, I guess the question that's begged, I think, is what is the role of intellectual humility play here? And what's the role of listening in this at the university?
I want to build off what Ravi said about the idea of the skills. I teach rhetoric, so people often think that I teach just public speaking. Well, there's really no speech unless there's also a receiving and a listening type of that. And that is an absolute critical skill of developing that. And that requires that we enter into conversations with, in the testing ideas, with some intellectual humility, that we can learn something from these interactions and will learn something from these interactions. So there's both the intellectual humility, but also that intellectual curiosity. I want to go one step further and talk about also a generosity piece of this. We are really imperfect beings. We're using the only tool we have available, which is a really imperfect tool of language, to try to put meaning about the ideas we have. And we're going to stumble and we're going to make mistakes. And so also entering into those conversations with a generosity toward ourselves, but a generosity toward others, and the ways in which we can listen and learn and help others learn about the process. This is the work of an academic community, and I'm thrilled to welcome you in and have you in classrooms to engage in this with us.
Great. Thanks very much. Michele, I have a few questions for you. The Chicago principles are fairly straightforward. How do those come to life on campus, and what are your thoughts about how they might guide programming efforts on campus?
So in my role as Dean of Students in the university, I oversee a lot of different departments that are very student-centric. So everything from housing to the Center for Leadership and Involvement to spiritual life, to the Office of International Affairs. And when you have students, they want to do all kinds of activities on campus, including, of course, their academics, but they want to get involved in student organizations. As Ravi mentioned, they are often keen and ready to explore various aspects of their personal development and identity. And they oftentimes take on causes. They become activists and advocates for causes that are very near and dear to them. And that might involve a whole bunch of activities, everything from being part of a group to actively protesting and demonstrating, either on campus or in Chicago or anywhere else around the world. And we want to fully support all of those activities. And we do not, as an institution, I do not, as a dean, want to interfere or somehow govern or lean on students or student groups to do things that are easier for us or less hassle. That is not what creating an environment of free expression is all about. Having said that, I think it's perfectly reasonable for students to want or need advice and guidance on what they can and cannot do with respect to certain activities that might seem on the surface to be angry or, you know, getting in the face of the administration about causes they feel very strongly about. And they may want to know, can I do this as part of a protest or can I not? Similarly, student groups might want to invite a speaker to campus who is controversial or high profile or who others on campus might have a problem with. We want to be in a position to support those students in their goals rather than tell them, have you thought about someone who's less difficult? So making sure that we have resources and people available to help students through these various processes if they want that advice and guidance is really important. And I see that as an additional responsibility of the University of Chicago. It's not only to create this environment of free expression, but it's also to support our community members as they exercise that freedom of expression, right? So it practically can translate to having a really robust event management and event advising system. We have people on campus who are very experienced with how to run really successful events, whether they be small scale or very large scale events. So we work very extensively with student groups on their own event planning to make sure that it meets the goals they have, while also providing an opportunity for people who might disagree with the event, particularly if it involves a speaker, to have a voice in sharing that disagreement, but to do it in a way that gives everybody the opportunity to experience that event. We don't believe that any one group of people has the right to shut down the rights of another group of people to have an event, hear a speaker, and engage in an activity as long as it's allowed by university policy, which most events and speakers are. We don't have a speech code. We don't have a list of rules at the university level that says who you can and cannot invite to campus. If you're a faculty member, if you're a student, if you're a staff member, you have the ability to invite folks onto campus for events and such as speaker events or anything other like that. So I think that is one of the ways that you will see it translated, this very robust event advising process, and making sure that students know that we are available to give them advice. And also too, if students are upset by something they see or hear on campus, if they feel that it has crossed a line, if they see a flyer, or they hear about an event where a certain speaker put forward certain views, and they want to talk about why this is possible, it's also our responsibility to hear that student out and to take action if they are in fact right. Because as I said earlier, there are some forms of speech that we don't find appropriate. There are some forms of expression that aren't acceptable. But many are, and part of the process is to work with those students to make sure that they're heard and to make sure they're connected to resources that can help them put that frustration or that unhappiness in a productive channel. And that's not always easy, right? But we are committed to supporting students in that way as well.
Great, thanks. And just a quick follow-up. Would the university ever disinvite a speaker? Michelle?
No. That's probably the simplest way to answer that
Exactly.
question. The university really isn't actually in the habit of inviting speakers to campus. As I mentioned a couple of moments ago, our feeling is that the ability to invite people to campus is the privilege and in some ways even the right of the members of our campus community, the faculty, an academic department, a center, a group of students, even some staff might want to invite a speaker to campus for a professional development opportunity. So really the university isn't habitually bringing people to campus. Members of the university are habitually bringing people to campus. And the university's position is that they're not going to take a stance on whether or not they approve or disapprove of that speaker. The university's commitment is making sure that the event happens in the way it is supposed to, if the inviting party needs any assistance or support. But they really are not going to take a position on who or the right of whether or not anyone can invite someone to campus. I think that's very powerful, because I think in other institutions you see that university leadership or administrators will step in and intervene, or tell a group, no, you can't have that person for whatever reason. And really our stance is quite different. We want to support people to bring whoever they want to campus. The flip side of that, though, is that if somebody invites somebody to campus who is highly controversial, who others on campus find very distasteful and they disagree with their views, the university is not necessarily going to step in and defend that speaker. They'll make sure that that event can proceed, but they're not going to stand in the way of the controversy and the pushback that might ensue. And that, again, is part of the trade-off. We embrace free expression, but it doesn't mean the university is going to agree with everything and everybody that one of our campus members supports.
Thanks very much. Regine, thinking back to your time at the university and now your work here at the university, how have things shifted and changed? And maybe what hasn't shifted or changed over the course of that time?
Sure. Thanks, Mike, for that question. Some of the easiest, one of the easiest ways to answer that is the student population. I think that the college has grown very quickly, very significantly. I was a first year in the college 21 years ago, so this is my 13th orientation at the helm of the program, and my 21st orientation as a member of the community. But so the college has grown a lot. The student population has diversified as such. With that comes a diversity of views, a diversity of opinion, which is a wonderful thing. What I've seen is, and I've been humbled in seeing this, is the university be more vocal in taking and calling out things that are problematic, which is not something that I was used to seeing when I was a student. Certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say, and the university has always been very adamant about not taking a political stance or political position on things, but it has not shied away from saying this is a problem. This is not something that we support, and that gives for our students, particularly our younger students, that gives them some comfort in feeling at home at this place and feeling like they are not alone when they are concerned about particular issues that are really troubling our country and our society. So I think that's probably, for me, when I was an 18-year-old, one of the things that I really struggled with, and my peers really struggled with, particularly as a student of color, and something that I think our students of color and students from different non-majority backgrounds would feel pretty comforted in, and that's a difference from back then and today. One of the other things that I think is a big change is the support system for students that want to present a countering position or a countering event, for example. So Michele talked about if a faculty member or a member of the community wants to invite or chooses to invite someone to campus or host an event on campus that is not quite as popular or brings or reflects a view that isn't the views, that doesn't align with the views of the majority of our campus population. Sometimes that, I should say, when I was a student, I recall the student community really struggling to accept accept that and really struggle with how to respond to that being acceptable. And so now I feel like students they understand that is part of the community, the community's value. That is how we proceed. But there is a system, there is a mechanism, there are support systems for them in putting in place a counter event, a counter demonstration, a counter protest, to have an event in opposition to it, and to be equally or as supported, if not more supported. So I think those are the things that really stand out for me when I think about where we were 21 years ago, and where we are today. And I think I've had a small part in some of that, and I feel really humbled in that. Yeah, so that's what I've got.
That's great. I appreciate that a lot, and thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks.
Ellie, any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, free speech means that students should feel capable of and also empowered to speak up at all times, that their speech shouldn't feel stifled in any capacity or silenced by their peers, even if their opinion is unpopular. It means that we at the University of Chicago, and particularly in the college, both welcome and champion a diverse set of experiences and perspectives. We should celebrate thoughtful discourse that comes from a particularly principled place. So that's what it means for me as a student.
Appreciate that a lot. Thank you all for that. Was a great set of answers to that particular about what it means at the University of Chicago. So I really appreciate your thoughts. We're going to switch a little bit gears. Ravi, one might argue that two of our fundamental core values of the institution, diversity and inclusion and free expression, are at odds. And some argue that. Are they? And what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think this is a fascinating and really complex question. The short answer is that I see free expression and diversity and inclusion as inextricably linked. And I think they reinforce one another. They're core values, not necessarily because of laws or regulations, but because they're central to our mission as an educational institution. And so to take diversity for a second, we define diversity really broadly. You'll hear references to diversity of perspective, diversity of identity, diversity of experience. My work focuses on identity. And so part of my interest in this is equipping students with the skills needed to continue these conversations in hopes of answering pressing questions and ultimately advancing a more equitable society, which means part of our work is providing opportunities to practice, to create space for the inclusion of multiple perspectives, to potentially introduce perspectives when they're not represented. Hey, have you thought about this? I do think it's possible to do all of this with kindness and with generosity, as Layla mentioned before. There are a couple sort of theoretical and practical considerations that come to mind. On a theoretical level, I think, again, that free expression depends upon diversity and inclusion, and the diversity and equity work, not just on campus, but on a societal level, depends on free expression. We need a diversity of ideas to advance knowledge, for research to flourish. If on an inclusion level, if you're advancing an unpopular opinion, wouldn't you ideally want to do it in a way that can win people over? I think a sound argument plus a community where people feel valued can be a really winning combination. And then in terms of diversity and equity work more broadly, I think too often throughout history, people with unpopular opinions or opinions that haven't been favored by people in power have been silenced. And I think that's really dangerous. And so on a practical level, I think Michele said it before, that this doesn't mean we don't experience tension at times. And just because you can say something doesn't mean you should. I encourage people to consider context. Are you walking out of a class discussion and you want to continue to engage a challenging topic? Or are you sitting down to lunch after a really long week and everyone looks pretty tired? And I think those types of considerations thinking about those types of things can help you ultimately make a stronger argument or a stronger case.
Great. Thanks, Ravi. That's really helpful. And Regine, I think you started down this path in your last answer, but just how are we doing in that balance of free expression and diversity and inclusion?
I mean, I think it's a work in progress. I mean, we're working with 18 to 22-year-olds when we're talking about college students, and they're still growing, they're still developing. Or if I'm talking to you as an audience, you are still growing, you are still developing. Some of the more rewarding moments for me have been when I spent time in the residential life system, and the conversations that our students are having at the dining hall table or in their house lounges. And I've been witness to some amazing, some truly profound moments of students deeply engaging with each other on some tough topics around diversity and inclusion, and having these light bulb moments. And it's truly, truly powerful when you see students getting each other to change their minds about something, or break this idea that they've had for such a long time, something that's been deeply ingrained or passed down, and they're challenged by an idea and they're like, I never thought about that, and they walk away from that conversation and it has changed them for life. So as Ravi said, like, these two are inextricably linked, and I think this is the perfect place for those conversations and for those transformations to happen. And I've been blessed to see those happen in housing at the university.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to switch gears a little bit, and Leela, we're going to come back to you and ask, free expression works a little bit differently in the classroom because of the concept of academic freedom. Could you explain that concept so our folks can understand that?
So academic freedom and the nature of it is our inheritance from the great universities of Europe, who came up with Lehrfreiheit and Lernfreiheit, the freedom to learn, the freedom to teach. And I just want to throw in here a shout out to John Dewey. He wasn't at the University of Chicago when he did this, but in the early part of the 20th century, he was the head of the committee of university US academics who reaffirmed that value of academic freedom here in the United States across the nation. And he brought that work also to democracy and to the University of Chicago when he came here. The importance of that is it should be the place of the fullest expression of academic freedom, in the fact that professors and students are free to research, free to teach, free to express in that opening space. And the idea behind it was that faculty would be free from ecclesiastical and political pressure on teaching and research. And so its full expression then is a professor being able to express ideas in a classroom, choose materials in a classroom, choose assignments. And it's just that creative, a beautiful place for a professor. As Regine talked about, you're really lucky to be here at the University of Chicago because you're getting that both in residential life, and you're getting that from professors who have really creative, innovative, very different ways in which they're approaching topics and conversations in the classroom.
Great, thank you. So Ellie, are there ways that a student could express their concerns related to what a faculty member, says or presents in a class?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is that transparency is key. If you as a student feel unsettled by something that is said in the classroom, talk to your professor directly about it. They'll really appreciate your willingness to engage with them, and you will both be better off for it. Some of my sort of best experiences at the university have been when I've gone to a professor in office hours and said, hi, this thing that happened in class, this thing we talked about, or something that someone said or something that you said didn't quite sit with me right. And they want to know. As was mentioned earlier, students and professors, we're all here to learn and to discuss and talk with one another and be open. And I do think that that's certainly one of the major virtues of the university. And so more broadly speaking, professors will always welcome feedback from their students. If you have a question about an assignment, your academic performance, or truly anything at all, I'd recommend to talk to them. Go to office hours. They want to talk to you. They're here to both teach you and also to learn from you and to learn with you, alongside you. And so, as I've said before, some of my best experiences, some of the most important relationships to me have sort of stemmed from some of those experiences. So transparency is key. I'd recommend, if you have a situation that feels uncomfortable to you, to go talk to the professor directly about it.
Great. Thanks, Ellie. And Leela, just from a faculty member's perspective, are there other things you'd add to that?
Ellie said it beautifully, but I will reaffirm that faculty really do want to have those conversations. And sometimes class goes by really quickly and I may miss something. So please engage me. I might say something that I didn't mean to say, or I might say something that I mean to say. I want to be challenged. I want to engage in those conversations. And I think I openly speak for faculty here at the University of Chicago that we're here, we're doing this work because we want to engage with students and we want to engage disagreement as well.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, you know, as we enter this quarter, having most of us either learning or working remotely for the past several months, and we are going to continue to do so, the majority of our interactions have been or are going to be online via Zoom or other learning platforms, as well as all of our interactions on social media, right? So whatever the platform, Leela, how has our discourse shifted on these platforms over these past months? And what are some of the challenges with that?
I think there are a number of challenges to this platform. For those of you who are watching this later, you can see some of those challenges to this platform. If we were together engaging, it would be a different program, particularly in person. For me, the two largest challenges that I worry most about, and actually students that I've been teaching worry most about, are first issues of access. Not everybody has, and sometimes it's even us as faculty members and as people in student life, we don't always have the best internet connection. And that really, particularly falls heavily on students who might find their voices or feel like they're coming from the margins. And so I think we really have to be very careful and cautious and thoughtful about that as faculty members, but also as peers in ways that we can be supportive. I think the second thing I worry about, and students worry a lot about this, is the ability to record a session like this, to take something out of context, to have it be a video. That existed in real life in our classrooms, but in a very different way. It's much more real here. And it's the reason why we have guidelines around not doing that. If we're going to do this work together of disagreement, and particularly the transformational work that Regine talked about of disagreement that allows me to see something different and I change my view or adjust my view, I need to be able to be free in the laboratory of the classroom to do that kind of difficult, messy work. And it's at those places where it's the most messy that often the most learning takes place and the most transformation. And so we need to be generous and we need to enter those places with that curiosity, humility, and generosity. And as a laboratory where we're experiencing and experimenting together with ideas.
Great, thanks. Ellie, speak to us from your perspective related to how one can disagree with care and civility in this online world.
Absolutely. And I would say there's certainly been a paradigm shift for us as students. I think technology has always been something that we've grown up with. I'm 20 years old and it's been really instrumental to my upbringing. But I do have to say that sort of shifting everything to the online sphere has not been easy. It's been very challenging. The thing that I would say is key is respect. Respect in the online sphere is essential. We should, as students and representatives of the University of Chicago, we should carry ourselves online in the same way that we would in the real world, whether that's to be particularly vocal, to say things in an honest or perhaps rash way, or to be shy in some respects. The way that you carry yourself online, or the way one should only say or write things online that they would feel comfortable saying in person. And that's sort of how I live my life, particularly as we enter this increasingly online world. But that doesn't mean that we should shy away from discourse. In fact, what I would say is that intellectual and deliberate debate is always welcome, particularly, as we shift class time to the online world. However, I would say to always be mindful, as Leela said, of the permanence of the online sphere. So whereas in the three-dimensional classroom, words that are particularly biting may sting for a bit, they might fade or be forgotten. Things that happen online often have more permanence. So I would say to always welcome that sort of discourse, no matter how difficult it is, but to be mindful of the ways in which technology makes things more permanent than others.
Thanks. Great setup for a question for you, Ravi, quickly. What should student expectations be around social media, and what, if any, options are there for students to express concerns from the online sphere?
Sure. So I think the key takeaway here is that if you as a student have a concern, staff in our areas and across the university are always available to offer support. We may, in the course of our daily lives, experience situations that are uncomfortable and may or may not constitute policy violations, but either way, it's really important to process with trusted advisors, and we hope to be included in that group of trusted advisors for you. We do have a robust network of resources in place to support students who experience various forms of bias and discrimination. One easy place to start is the Bias Education and Support Team. And that's a group of staff members who are available to discuss concerns, help assess options, and connect you to a variety of resources. We assist university leadership in documenting incidents as part of ongoing assessment of campus climate. And I will also say, with regard to social media, again, I think this question of context and venue can be important, and that there may be value in taking a conversation offline or inviting someone to engage in dialogue at a different time. And the second point is that rest and respite, and sometimes taking a break from social media, and finding a space where you feel comfortable is absolutely essential.
Thank you very much for those wise words. The last topic before I ask each of you for some final thoughts, centers on this election year and the role of free expression in our political discourse. This year, like never before, has the notion of civil discourse, or some would argue lack thereof, been more important. Michele, I'll start with you. Does the university have a position or policies related to political engagement? And where might the students see that manifested?
So the university does not take any position on political parties or candidates. Their belief is that individual members of the campus community should be free to engage in whatever political activity that they want to in their personal time. But as a not-for-profit educational institution, there are certain rules about political activity on campus. So I won't go into all the details of that. Just to give a quick example, if a student organization wanted to invite a candidate for office to campus for a fundraising event or a get out the vote event, that would be something that we would likely not be able to permit due to certain laws that we have to follow to retain our not-for-profit status. As always, and I hope this has been a recurring theme that you've picked up on in today's conversation, anytime a student has a question about what kinds of political activity that they could engage in, particularly with respect to a student organization or in their status as a UChicago student, lots of people on campus who can offer great advice on what you can do and what you can't do, work with you on different options. We want our students to be actively involved in civic life, to be actively involved in political activities that mean a lot to them. That is fundamental to our democracy. But there are a few rules that perhaps might be different from what students would anticipate or expect. So the Institute of Politics on campus does a great job of educating everyone on campus, but with a particular focus on students around the political process, and they are great sources of support and advice. We have a whole slew of advisors in the Center for Leadership and Involvement who can offer advice and guidance if you're part of a student group. But pretty much any student-facing staff person or center could point you in the right direction if you have questions about political activity this fall.
Great, thank you. We're going to go to Regine and to Ellie, and we'll start with Regine. But I guess the question that's in my mind right now are what lessons can we learn about how things are going in the political climate, and any advice that you all might offer from your perspective as we enter the autumn quarter?
Sure, I'm happy to start. And Ellie led into this a little bit with her last comments, and they actually meld quite beautifully with Ravi's. What I would offer is some words of wisdom for students, and it's not just about the political climate, it's also everything else that's going on in our world and in our country right now. And it's to remember that context is important, language is important. We are a country that is made up of many cultures, and that also is important. And we are often very hyper vigilant in our response to things, and social media and technology allow us to be very, very quick in our response, and to take a beat, take a pause when responding, when reacting. I like to ask people to caution people, remind them to sleep on it, give it a little bit. If you are penning a response, penning a post, go ahead and draft it, let it sit, let it marinate, come back to it, because once it's out there, it's out there. We have seen it with 18-year-olds, we have seen it with 57-year-olds, things get screenshot in milliseconds, and it is there for the world to see, and it has huge ramifications. So it's a simple one. Take a beat, take a pause, give it a second, and think about whether you actually want to press post or send, and if it is a true reflection of where you are.
Great, that's really helpful, thanks. Ellie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll first start by saying, as a third-year student, it's also my first general election year on campus. For most, I think actually for all students on campus, it's their first year in a general election. I remember really well mailing in my absentee ballot during the midterms. As a first year, it was like 3 weeks into school. I was by the law school on 60th Street. And I remember that was a really exciting thing for me. And I wish I'm staying at home this quarter, but I wish I could be back on campus. I wish things were normal in some capacity so that we could all be together and engaging in the political process together during this really exciting time. So I'm also really excited, nevertheless, even though I'm not going to be on campus, I'm really excited to engage with my peers on political issues. I think that we should all be making a really deliberate effort to go to talks, to talk about politics in class, to attend the sessions that the Institute of Politics has created for us, and to just engage generally in the issues. But I would say, and I think this is certainly a theme that I just want to echo, we can learn a lot from those with different perspectives, or who are sort of coming at the issues from really different places. I'm from the Northeast, and I'm a staunch liberal. I sort of get caught up in that bubble. And I think one of the real virtues of going to the University of Chicago, sort of transplanting and shifting into a Midwestern student, is the fact that there are kids from all over the country and all over the world with really different perspectives that come at issues from really different places. And there's a lot of value in that. And I think it's really important to hear opinions from all sort of sides of the spectrum, or parts of the spectrum, so that we can refine our own views, particularly during a general election, particularly, during an election period at large. And I challenge you to do the same. I challenge you to sort of lean into these conversations, to really deliberately have these conversations in your dorm rooms, to go to talks, to engage willingly in class discussion, to do research and to read up on the issues, to sort of better inform yourself. I also want to echo that we should be engaging sort of in a respectful and honest way, to assume that every individual who's having these conversations with you comes from an honest and earnest and good place, a place of good intentions. And so I think there's a lot to learn from these political sort of cycles or general elections. And I think in this moment is really when the Chicago principles, the sort of values as written in the Stone Report, can really come to light, can really sort of show and be most virtuous.
Thank you. Leela, just any last thoughts on that particular topic?
Regina and Ellie did a really nice job of setting that up. This is what I study. So if you want to continue this conversation, please reach out to me. I would also say that that the social media drives us into those kind of echo chambers, and Ellie talked about that, and we've lost a little bit of the middle. So as someone who both analyzes discourse, but also thinks about the practices and the frameworks that can reclaim that kind of robust and inclusive types of debate that we need to have to maintain democracy, and I would say also an academic environment, is to really listen and think about the ways that you can create that in your circles of friends, in the classroom, on the quad, and all the spaces that you occupy on campus.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to give each of you the opportunity to, before we close out, to give any last minute thoughts or words of advice to the class of 2024. I'd love to hear those. And so we'll start with you, Ellie. How's that?
That sounds good. So it's really strange for me to think that it's been 2 years since I was in your position. It truly does. And I feel like yesterday that I was huddled with my friends, my new friends, people that I still talk to, and, am closer than ever with now. It's weird to think that we were huddled together, really sweaty, really tired from a long week of orientation activities in Mandel Hall, just really exhausted and excited. And, I know that your orientation looks really different. As I've said, I'm not in Chicago right now, and I don't intend on being in Chicago for the fall. And for that, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve for things to be this way. And it's unfortunate that this is how your college journey begins. But I want you to know that you're embarking on what will be the most challenging and rewarding and wonderful 4 years of your life thus far. The University of Chicago's campus is really a special one. and our values, particularly, our values of free speech and our commitment to discourse and inquiry, they really do percolate to all aspects of student life. I challenge you to embrace our commitments to free speech and inquiry and sort of that excitement and love of learning that comes along with being a University of Chicago student. And I promise you that you will be better off for it.
Thanks, Ellie. Thanks very much. Regine.
Ellie did a fantastic job. Like the very last part, because I can't quite relate anymore to the first part, being so much older. But the last part was fantastic. There are a lot of people that have worked really, really hard over the course of the last few months to prepare for this coming academic year, in particular this fall. And it obviously will look nothing like we've ever seen before. But we are prepared for the challenge, and we are looking forward to engaging with all of you wherever you are joining us from, be it on campus, be it in the residence halls, be it from your apartments in Hyde Park, somewhere else in the United States, somewhere else in the world. We will make the best of what we've been dealt with, and it will be a very rewarding experience nonetheless. Being a student at the University of Chicago is an experience like nothing else. And as Ellie said, you will be a far, far better person coming out of this, and you will feel truly, truly rewarded. I am humbled to be an alum of this fine institution. It is not an easy experience, I will not lie to you. But it is truly rewarding, and I am very proudly a U Chicago lifer.
Thanks, Regine, very much. Leela.
I want to echo this from a faculty perspective, because again, Ellie and Regine really did it nicely, but every fall, this for a faculty member is our favorite time of year, embarking on a new academic piece. Part of the isolation over the last few months has even made us more eager to engage students and ideas. We've missed those interactions. So whether you're joining us in person or joining us remotely, I want you to know that you have a faculty that is just chomping at the bit, actually, to be in the classroom again and to engage ideas and discussions and advance knowledge. I also want to just say very briefly, if you have any questions about the principles or building skills or capacities, please check out the website, and I'd be happy to continue conversations with you. But that's also true about everybody on the panel and every faculty member and staff member that you're going to encounter. So my words of wisdom for you are take advantage of the amazing opportunities that are here among a fine group of faculty and a fine group of people who are here to support you as resources.
Thank you, Leela, very much. Ravi, we'll let you go next.
Sure. I would just say what we've talked about today for me represents an aspirational vision. And I think you have something to contribute as part of that we strive to create a community where everyone feels welcomed and valued, and where everyone has the opportunity to create and enhance scholarship. And if you have ideas on ways to help advance that vision, if you experience challenges, I just want to underscore this point that we really welcome the opportunity to connect with you. And just that we're really, really excited to meet you and engage with you.
Great, thanks, Ravi. And Michele, you'll get the last word of advice and thoughts to our students.
Well, it's really tough to follow my colleagues and Ellie, because those were fantastic remarks. I could not agree more. I think what I would just say is that what makes a place at University of Chicago so special is the people. And yes, we've got beautiful Gothic buildings and gargoyles and grotesques and wrought iron gates and residence halls that look like Hogwarts and fantastic coffee shops and all of the wonderful things that we love about campus. But at its heart, the University of Chicago is about the people. So for those of you who are going to not be able to join us this autumn because of circumstances with travel or the pandemic or whatever it may be, or for those of you who are going to be at home because for other reasons you can't come to campus, and even for those of you who will be on campus, but who may be experiencing some of your classes in a virtual way. The key point is that each and every one of you still has the ability to make connections with faculty, with each other, with the Res Life staff, with we administrators. The medium might be a little bit different, but one day, I promise you, we will all be together and you will look back 4 years from now when you graduate and know that you really were at the vanguard of what it means to be an adaptable, flexible, resilient student. And for that, I commend you. And I want to also congratulate you on everything you've achieved that has gotten you this far.
Thanks, Michele, very much. I would like to thank the 5 of you for your time this morning, your insights, and your knowledge. I think we've had a really, really great discussion, so thank you. I also would like to point out some resources for you, the students, that you might want to explore. The university's website related to free expression, freeexpression.uchicago.edu. The Breezes program for public discourse information is located on the college website, so please go and look at that. Those sites both will obviously have information about what we've talked about today, but also opportunities to engage around these topics if you want to pursue that in a further way. And so please visit those sites. We really hope this has been helpful for you as you start your journey at the University of Chicago. We wish you a great first year, and we look forward to seeing you in person on campus soon. Thank you very much for your time this morning.